So, we're going to I'm going to take you on a bit of a journey, and the people who are at retreat you can just sit back and hear this again, but the World GBC was an idea. Started from the US GBC, who was the first Green Building Council, who decided that bringing industry together to look at how together we transform the market, turned it into an organisation, formalised it. Then those people got together in 2002. You can see the lovely attire worn, and this is in Texas, and you can see David and Rick, Houston's there, Che Wall. Those people then said, what do we need to do to turn this idea into a global movement? That was back in 10 years, 12 years, what is it now? 11 years ago. And the first thing they decided to do was they needed to formalise it into an organisation so that there was an independent body that was driving forward this idea. Some of the key things in this first media release of the World GBC was that we were a federation of national councils or individual councils. That the World GBC was to provide a network where we can collaborate and aggregate best practice. So to do that, to form that network and to start this global movement, they thought the first thing we needed to do was to enable GBCs like yourselves to understand and learn from their experience, so they developed a membership kit. So how do you set up an organisation? What's the ABCs of starting an industry-driven, not-for-profit, green building council that's going to drive this agenda forward within your country? So the work of the Green Building Council in the first 5 or 6 years was very much at this foundation level, creating this network and enabling knowledge sharing, meetings like this, other one-on-one meetings that happen, capacity building, making sure that your organisation can improve and become stronger, and make sure you've got good governance and all of those things, to make sure that you could have resources that helped you do that. And that was mainly from learning from other green building councils at the time, to help you get credibility in your country, so that when you establish your organisation, you can get a high-level board, so that you can get government on board, and really loaning credibility from other countries. And that was then, defined into quite a membership process as we've evolved over time. So these are the things that originally in the first 5 or 6 years the World GBC did. Then, over time, these meetings got bigger, there were more councils, there were more people at these meetings, and each GBC was doing what it was doing in a very good way, but going in different directions, meeting their national priorities, dealing with either poverty issues and affordable housing issues, or dealing with defining green rating systems, or whatever it was, done in a different, unique way in your countries. But essentially we're all doing the same thing: educating, we're certifying, defining green building, we're communicating with the industry, we are networking, enabling businesses to connect with each other, we're advocating for government to increase policy, to provide incentives, or whatever it is. And this is happening in a slightly different way, but exactly the same model of market transformation all around the world. And it's been very successful, as we've heard today. 98 councils. But this focus of your organisation that creates this network and drives the membership process as we've got bigger, and now you see that councils on here that are green are quite mature organisations. The established councils who have been around a while, who have all of the operational details in place. You asked for more. You wanted more from your organisation. So we started doing more. We have the foundation of membership services and capacity building, and then we're looking at, okay, what else can we do that adds value to you as national councils? So we started looking at the policy task force. How can we share advocacy experiences? Are there things that we can do that will help influence governments more? We developed things like the business case, all of the things you've heard about today, the awards, the partnerships. And that is to make sure that as you, as organisations, grow and evolve, we are still relevant to you, and we're still able to support you, and we're still able to add value to your membership services for this global movement that we are all part of. So that's 2010, takes us to 2011, 12, what are we now, 13? To 2012 when we were 10 years old. Last year we were 10. We had a lovely cake made for us at Greenbuild last year. And at that point we started to go, okay, we've got to this point in time, we're 10 years old, let's look back and look at the successes, look at what people have wanted from the World GBC until now, and then that'll enable us to start looking forward, to look at what is in the next segment of the pyramid. We started off by asking you. So it was actually mostly established councils that answered the questions in the CEO survey that I did at kind of the end of 2012. The key outcomes of this for me, I'm just going to skim over about 3 of the key points that have influenced how we've driven the next steps. The ones that are smaller are the ones that are more important. So that's a bit backwards. So the ones at the bottom are the ones not so important on the slides. So mostly you want the World GBC to be focused on leadership, on campaigns, on insight, and really, for me, I take it as that's helping you be leaders and for us to be leaders rather than kind of operational or controlling what you do. So I think that was quite useful because we have previously been quite operationally focused, whereas you're saying that you want us to be more leadership focused. What are the key issues? This is a question. What are the key issues that you think need to be addressed to improve the environmental and social performance of the built environment? The number one issue that you said you had, or that we have, is the lack of awareness. And that is a key problem that all GBCs have. How do we take the good work that we're doing within the industry and create awareness in the public? Martin talked about creating awareness and impact with tenants. How do we create demand for green building? I'm not going to use that one. And then the next question was, how do you describe your level of engagement with the following groups? But I'm just going to focus on the World GBC and the regional networks here. So blue, I'll go to the next one, this is a little bit confusing here, but blue is true partnerships, and green, the green one is kind of moderate or occasional interactions. So if you look at now, true partnerships, the World GBC, yeah, it's okay, but there's quite a lot of moderate interaction there. With the regional networks, definitely not viewed as true partnerships. I think Europe's the exception, but a lot of sort of moderate and okay interaction. And then the question was, what do you see in 3 years? What do you want in terms of the relationship with the World GBC and the regional networks? People want a lot more. People want true partnership. People want more interaction, both at the regional level and at the global level. So the question is, how do we do that? So how do we build these true partnerships? What is it that binds us? What are the things that are going to be useful to you, which will then attract you to want to participate in these projects you've heard about today? And then we started in this process of reflection of our 10 years, we started looking at where are we on our journey towards market transformation? Have we hit the mainstream? Or are we still at this innovative early adopter phase of business development? Most councils are definitely still at the early adopter and innovative phase. And the point, I think, of time that we're at is how do we jump over this chasm, to really jump into the mainstream? Because if we don't keep evolving and keep inventing ourselves and going beyond the technical and beyond rating tools, I don't think we're going to get into this mainstream. And so the conversation we want to have today, thank you, is how do we build this pyramid to have these leadership focuses, these strategic things we do together to help us all get into the mainstream and become very significant, successful organisations that transform this built environment to be actually sustainable. So what is in this box at the top of the pyramid? What does the future look like for you as an organisation individually, but also for our collective? What should we do together? What should we say together? What does this feel like? So these are the types of questions that we've been discussing for the last couple of days with the hippos and the giraffes. Some of the kind of key essence pieces of this that we think that whatever we decide together, it needs to be very inspirational and catchy. Some lines from other organisations that say things like, a future without waste, making poverty history. We don't have these catchy lines yet as a global movement. We know that we need to have tangible results. We need to be able to talk about our global impact, the actual difference that we make on energy use, on water savings, on health impacts. We actually need to know what that impact is. And today we only can talk about it in terms of the rating tool impacts, and we don't aggregate that up to the global level. If we're talking about jumping that chasm into the mainstream, we need to speak to the public. We need to not just speak about square metres of green building, but we need to speak about something that resonates. We talked about with the safari driver. They were asking us what we did. And, we have that conversation constantly. I know you do, coming here in the taxi. So what's this conference you're going to? What is it that you do that means something to them, not just to the engineers and the architects? And we really need to focus on how we build a much stronger relationship between the local and the global. And I think so far today we've demonstrated that that's happening, and that I talked about this kind of evolution of the way that the World Green Building Council is working, and some of the work being powered by local GBCs, but them actually seeing that doing it just as a national agenda doesn't make much sense. So how do we make sure that that strong connection is between local and global? So my vision for us as an organisation is that this idea that Rick and David and Che and Houston had back in Texas in 2002 has been successful and is at the stage of evolution, and is at an important stage where we can still keep our individuality, we can still keep doing what we want to be doing and all of the fantastic work that's going on in your councils, but we can be much more joined up in our thinking. We can be very clear about some of the things that we want to do together and where that will take us and the impact that that will have. So the conversation that we want to have now, and Roger's going to help take us on a bit of the journey and reflect back from some of the thinking that we had in the 2 days. And then we're going to get some of your input into what you think could be in the top of this pyramid. So I'll hand over to you, Roger.
Okay, we're going to now move into a session where I'm going to try to revive a bit the sense of kind of stimulated excitement and dialogue that we had on our retreat, and then we're going to ask you all to go outside or at the tables there in groups of about 6 to 8 and focus on a couple of questions that, in a somewhat more generalized way, we also tried to do during our retreat of the board and some of the CEOs. Now, many of you are still in the room, and of course, feel free at any time to chime in with some ideas if I don't seem to capture what was the essence of our vision quest during the board meeting. But I'm going to just show a very small subset of some of the slides that I showed before. I'm not going to do the guided meditation that the board did, but we're going to jump into some of the key points. But first, I do want to just give people the flavor. Jane has talked about the where we've come from as a movement, and of course the strategic planning exercise, which will ultimately be a strategic plan for this organization, was what we began working on during the retreat. And that's what we also wanted to get your input into. But one of the ways that we tried to think about this was to think about the future in a way that, for a moment, was a little less apocalyptic, a little less frightening than maybe it really will be, or maybe elements of it will be, but to instead try to think about a future that we would really want. A future that if we did some time travel and we arrived in some community that we care about and love and found that it was in a better place than we thought, what would it take to bring about such a future within 37 years, which is a very long time? But that exercise of trying to sort of fall in love with the future in a way that really gives us the motivation to want to create that future is just, for me personally, a more powerful way to motivate me than just to tell me that unless I do this, things are going to get really awful. And I mean, I do think that that is also powerful, and I also acknowledge that many people, even on the retreat, feel that is a more powerful motivator for them. But we tried to focus on a future that would be positive, and then try to figure out how would we get there, what ultimately would be the role of the World Green Building Movement, the World Green Building Council, and then the individual councils. And those will be the questions that you'll take outside after I just throw up a few maybe provocative ideas. But then you'll go outside and think about what could the World Green Building Council do to make that kind of future more likely, and what would be the role of the individual green building councils in helping the World Green Building Movement do that. So that's sort of a summary of what I'm going to say. And then now let me take you through, and as you could say, it's a little last moment how we're putting together this slide combo here. And as I press the button, I note that it doesn't quite move it, but that's fine. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is set the scene a bit with some facts, some demographic information that we do know. So while and we took people through this exercise to think about a positive future, we were not doing it sort of in a utopian way. We weren't saying it would be a land of Merlins and fairies in which you got whatever you wanted whenever you wanted it and everyone was happy. It was bounded by some practical realities. One practical reality is we're, in the next 37 years, likely to move from a planet with about 7 billion people on it, who today about a little more than half live in cities, to a planet with 9.7 billion people on it, the great majority of whom will live in urbanized areas. 70% or more will live in urbanized areas. Things that you might not have thought about during that time period, the next 37 years, that additional 3.7 billion people, that's a lot of people. It's not just because of lots of people being born, it's because even in the poorest countries, the life expectancy is expected to be advanced from about 57 years to 70 years, just people living longer, so more people on the planet. Some other things just to keep in mind, Nigeria is likely to have almost as many people in 2050 as the United States. And of that increase in population that I'm talking about half of it, of that entire 3.7, will occur in Africa. China will, by 1950, have begun to lose population. India will still be growing. There's a bunch of interesting demographics that just is useful to keep in mind. And I did show people some examples of kind of, inspiring visions of the future. This Sahara Forest project, Qatar, doesn't look like this yet, but it's kind of a stimulating way to rethink. Obviously, we'll have to completely rethink our agricultural paradigms. There will not be enough, our current way of producing food will not be sufficient to feed this giant new population. Therefore, there may be rebirth in cities. This is an idealized portrait of Detroit, which I promise you does not look like this now. Where urbanized areas may become also agricultural centers. The idea, obviously, of unconventional forms of sails for large boats. And then the last thing, just to quickly highlight, is the idea that as you think about the future, it's very easy to fall into a kind of incrementalism, where you're just saying the future will be a lot like today, but some trends will just be a little different. But more or less, think about it using today's reference points. That, I think, doesn't take us into the visionary mode. Henry Ford, famous for pointing out that if he had asked customers when he was coming up, again, probably there are other people around the world who are also doing this, but in America we have decided it was Henry Ford, the combustible engine, that kind of thing, that if he had asked people what they wanted, they would have just said, we want faster horses, not a car, which he thought about. Same with Steve Jobs. He made the point that you have to show people the future. You have to show them the cool iPad they never thought they would want because they never had seen it before. So that's an important part of being visionary. Now, to move into a slightly more offbeat mode, visions of the future are famously restrained by the social and cultural prejudices and limitations of the time. So the Jetsons, that's supposed to take place in 3978, the Jetsons that are supposed to take place in the year 2062, really looks like a time when it looks basically like suburban home in the United States in the 1960s. You have the wife that doesn't work, who steals money from the husband's wallet so she can go to the super shopping center in the sky. You have a lot of, it tells you more about suburban America than it tells you about, the whole idea that they still love cars, but they get to fly. The cars are flying. So it's basically, again, telling you more about America in the 1960s than it is about the future. And similarly, I would argue El Planeta de los Simios, the Planet of the Apes, is a movie which is equally obsessed with issues of the 1970s. There's the Statue of Liberty's been blown up by nuclear holocaust, and again, those are not the issues of today. Those are not the issues of today. So, what I am encouraging people to do in just a second is to focus on to create a world that we really want, a world that we can really fall in love with. What is it that the World Green Building Council needs to do and as a movement needs to do, and what can the individual councils do to get us there? Now, to give you a little bit of a push in some directions, let me quickly tell you what the board and the members of our team thought were some interesting visions of the future. And these are broad themes. There were lots of really creative and wonderful ideas, but one theme that was very dominant was that the future will be a better future, will be one in which, and I'll just use this word kind of metaphorically, a great deal of things have been redistributed and distributed to decentralized and distributed. So, for example, the more distributed energy and distributed resources, more locally accessible, less centralized, but also that would be true politically as well. There was a sense that centralized government in its current form has proven itself very ineffective at dealing with global level problems. They might have been valuable in achieving their individual country goals at key moments, but the kinds of issues that we're dealing with now are, atmospheric, they're planetary, they know no boundaries. And state governments have not been terribly powerful at addressing those issues. So there's a sense that in the future we might need to have forms of government that are closer to the people, to communities, local governments, mayors, neighborhoods may even be the area where you're trying to address your issues and trying to advance the causes that you really care about. There was also a sense that the world's going to have to become far more sensitive to our interdependence. That one person said, and I think it was Lisa that said, it's going to have to move from a world of I and maybe kind of the individualism that, at least in my country, is heavily highlighted as sort of the key to success, to a period of greater interdependence and relying on each other in our neighborhoods, in these more distributed areas. So that was, I think, part of it. The notion that buildings will be more and more parts of networks, and the neighbor district-wide activities will make the role of buildings very significant, but it will be in this role of part of a system as opposed to just the individual buildings. There was a comment during the discussions that government, in order to advance this new paradigm, there'll have to be a new business model for government itself. Government will have to be reimagined. The way it addresses taxation, the whole concepts may have to be reimagined. Now, those were just a few glimpses of the future, and you may have better, more encouraging ones. The interesting fact was that we tried to think about what would it take to get to this better place, this better world that at least some people could imagine. And there, the group in many cases went to a dark place. There was a sense that things would have to get a lot worse before they got better. There was a interesting sense that there would have to be some catastrophes even around how climate change was playing out, that people would have to see the limitations in our current government forms, paradigms, the way our communities are built, and that would force people inevitably to do some more revolutionary thinking. Yes, there would be technological revolutions. Yes, it's possible that technological revolutions would make the catastrophes unnecessary, but there was a sense that a more practical perspective was that we would be focusing a lot on adapting to a world that was being affected by climate change, affected by resource scarcity, affected by a bunch of challenges that were very, very substantial, and that we would need to reinvent a whole bunch of our institutions to address. So with that as sort of the basic context, again, I just want to encourage people to get to the tables right out here or outside. If there's more than 7 or 8 of you at that one table, no matter how interesting you all think you are, move to another table so that we can more broadly get people a chance to talk. And I would suggest that board members and people that were part of the original dialogue distribute themselves a bit so they can share more about what has been addressed. When we get back, we'll hear a bit from folks that have been thinking about these two questions, and also, if time allows, we'll also hear from 2 very eloquent and thoughtful participants in the process to drill down on a couple of the themes that we all talked about. So if that makes sense, Jane? Okay. Okay. Since I'm making this up as I go along, I will say the questions. The questions are, in order to reach the kind of world that we would be proud to have our children and grandchildren live in, what is the role of the World Green Building Council, and perhaps in general the green building movement, in accomplishing that better world? and you may have use some of the reference points I've made about interdependent world or whatever, or come up with your own. And then the second question is sort of, I guess, inspired by the John F. Kennedy comment. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. What is it that your Green Building Council can contribute? What can you do that will help accomplish these important goals? So those are the two questions, and Jane and I and board members will wander around and tell you either our wisdom or our lack of wisdom on these issues, but enjoy yourselves. This is supposed to be just a good time. You have about 20-25 minutes for this.
In mind, we should have a very diverse answer to the question, what do we need to be or do to get us to the future we want? I'm just going to take 5, maybe 6 little ideas, discussion points, so I'm going to ask for those people who love talking out. I'm going to hand you the microphone. Who wants to start? Ideally, not a board member or someone that was on the retreat.
Young.
Here we go.
So one of the ideas in our group we had is that we should shift from being building-centric to people-centric. So even our metrics, they tend to be absolute. They're not with reference to individual. What does it mean for me as an individual? So that's one of the ideas we have.
Great.
Great.
Exactly.
Our group kind of discussed similar themes, and I think 2 ideas came about. Will GBC continue to be the key voice and link between industry and government? Okay. And we need a generation X or Y or millennia, a 20-year-old, 25-year-old on the board now. Because to create, and this is what they want us to create in the next 37 years, we need to listen to them. They are future investors, occupier, facility managers, So.
I like that.
So they're survived long enough.
Right, exactly. Well, they'll be living to be 120 years old, too.
Something we discussed, but it's not sure if the government retreats more, and that's more to the market, or the other way around. In more than 30 years. But still, the World Green Building Councils should be linking pin and should be representing the market for the government, or representing the government for the market. So that's a really key thing, and we wish the World GBC would move more in that direction.
Great.
Okay, we're going to take one more.
We thought that it would be great to work with school kids, so Green Schools Initiative, keep going with that one. We thought that it would be important to engage with the facilities management community in building operations. I haven't met anyone who's a facilities manager here. The other important one was to work with building code a bit more. It's quite concrete stuff from our group. Building code around the world can be improved in terms of sustainability.
Okay, hold on to the mic there, Orion. Someone close to you is going to take it next. Okay, so the next part, we wanted to hear if there were any concrete ideas of things that you locally might be able to do to contribute to getting us to this future.
So all of the GBCs work very closely and work to share best practices already, but we discussed more of a live platform, a way that we can, because of the time differences, it's so difficult to get on the phone, as you noting. So it would be great to have a platform where all of the GBCs who can sort of informally reach out and say, I'm struggling to fundraise. And then someone else can weigh in with opportunities. And we try with this with body task forces and different collaborations, but take it to the next step, because we're accomplishing so much here today in person. Let's try to replicate that throughout the year.
This is like a Yammer type thing, or whatever the future version of that is.
we can offer some office space, but what a suggestion I made in our discussion was, I think we need World GBC staff in each region, full-time staff, at least one in each region, and we'll offer a desk and a chair and maybe coffee or something like that.
Can't have bags.
20% of the time. Offers 20% of South Africa Green Building Council's time.
Within their memberships. So, could contribution in kind be made from our members to actually put forward staff on secondments, short-term contracts, who actually would wear a GBC hat in that region? Because, otherwise I just think, there aren't the resources on there for it to happen.
Carl, to lead your part of it, and then we're going to have some question and discussion around what she talks to. So she's just going to talk for 5 minutes or so on this, and then we're interested in some feedback and ideas in reaction to that. Thanks. What did you bring that for?
I don't know. Okay. This is kind of the stretch we had a discussion, 6 discussions, separate discussions of what could be a shared visioning process. And it was very interesting to see a lot of common threads that came out of all the discussions, different people, really, different ways of thinking. And this is the stretch we had at the end of what were the things that we brought up. And I can say that mainly we were focused on 3 main questions. 1, do we really need a shared vision? And if we do need a shared vision, how should that vision look like? The second one was, how do we really create that shared vision? And the third, which I think was the most interesting, and we got less to discuss it, okay, so we have a shared vision and we operated it and everyone are satisfied with that. How do we really execute that vision? How do we really create the sense that we are a movement going together on one shared vision? So I will give you some flavor of the main discussions and kind of the questions or main consensus that we had. We started in saying, yes, the GBC, the World GBC movement, has to have a clear vision. And it has to be one unified vision. It has to be inspiring. It has to be appealing. People should look at it and want to go according to it. And we said that it needs to be a point of reference. So everyone, whether it's a GBC, a regional network, or an individual, it needs to look at it and see it as a leading goal. We said a lot about the leadership role and how the World GBC should set the ground for leadership in everything that it does, and it should be stated in the vision. And then we had a huge discussion, okay, so how does this vision look like? And we said that it should be inspiring, but on the same while, it should be very clear. It should be in simple words. People should know what it means, and they need to relate to that. They need to look at the vision and feel that it could be trusted, that they could feel something about it. It doesn't need to be only on a rational level. It needs to be more emotional, that people will sense. And it relates to some of the comments that were here, that people will need to see that they are the center. It's not about buildings, it's not about concrete or materials, it's about people-centered perspective. And then we had a very interesting discussion on that session and also on some of the other discussions, that we don't really need people to know that it's a green building or a sustainable building. We need them to know what they want. And if they want it, we need to create the platforms to give them. So Jane was talking about us talking to the taxi driver. You said the game driver. And he asked us, what are we doing? And we feel a lot of times that we say we are in the sustainability movement and the green building, and people do not know what it means. So we said it's not really important for them to know what green building is. It's more important that we ask them what kind of building they want to live or what kind of environment. They will say we want a healthy, we want a livelihood, a social fabric, and so on. And this is what we should deliver to them. So that's about like the terms that we use. Coming then, we said that we talked a lot about how this vision, the World GBC vision, should be in connection with the GBC's visions. And we said that the World GBC vision should be some kind of an overall vision. It should be an holistic one that will really, as I said, create the leading, the reference point. And then the GBCs need to correlate and interconnect with that. So each GBC has to have something that adheres to that overall vision. But again, it could be more concrete, more relevant to each of the specific countries that we are placed in. And as well, we mentioned the regional networks. And then we kind of talked to 3 main principles that this vision should be. 1, we said that the overall NGOs and environmental NGOs have gone through being, councils went from an NGO that is environmentally focused to one that is more about sustainability and more that is about business oriented. So we need to reflect that in our vision. We said that we need to reflect the fact that we are all about market transformation. So the fact that we are a transformation of market on a very wide sense should be reflected in the vision that we're giving. And the last thing is, again, the fact that we are business oriented. We do not need to be shy about that. Vice versa, we need to put it out, put it up front that the market is the one that is going to lead it. So all that, those principles should be reflected in the vision. And then like two of the questions that we had, and we didn't sort it because it was 6 sessions of 10 minutes each. And I think that they are interested. We raised the question, do we need to have a shared definition of what a sustainable built environment is, or what a green building is, or even on a larger scale, what a green city is? Do we need a shared vision or definition or not? This was one question. And the second one was, how do we really operate upon the shared vision? So again, we have this vision, we agreed on that vision, we're all on the same base. How do we really create the sense of a movement on a very daily basis? How do we communicate with each other on that same shared vision? So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Very good.
So there were specific things. I remember one example that you talked about yesterday was like whether we needed a common strapline that each GBC might have under their logo or under their name. There was also ideas about whether we needed to move towards some common use, some common branding as well, to reflect the shared thinking and reflect the shared vision. I think one of the next steps that we might look at is what might this strapline be? What might actually be a future without waste type of strapline? I know it would be great to work on that right now, but I think it's a little bit too challenging, this sort of environment. But that's something that I would like to take further and see if we can actually find something. So expect to hear something on that from me in our monthly updates, so I want your ideas. Any thoughts or reflections? Any questions on this shared visioning idea and the importance of this? Bit of a tricky one to kind of just jump into, I know. Any other quick comments? Otherwise we're going to just move to... we had one? Can we take this one over here first?
What is important to note is that, yes, we recognize the idea that WGBC remains overall and becomes the main church bearer for all these regional and individual GBCs, so that we achieve the global goal.
Well, to comment on this, yeah, we should have a shared vision, but I think the vision should be developing as many things as possible at the same time, you know? You don't know what's going to work, you have to give it a shot, you have to be entrepreneurial. That's what also Stefan has learned me. You still have to learn to do a lot of things at the same time and learn from each other in that developments. And I don't know what's the key to a sustainable built environment. I don't know what it's going to be in 2050. But if we just, well, combine our efforts and try as many things as possible, we will certainly find it.
Well, my take on this is really looking at main ideas of how WGBC can be better organized with a clear system to achieve all that we talk about on this vision exercise. Now, I use a small human body there just to explain something, because you and I know no two cells are identical, really, but yet it requires a whole system to actually pull the whole thing together as a workable, functional human body. And there's nothing accidental about it. So I think there's a lot of lessons to learn from nature, as Mohammed would love the word nature, spending 2 days in nature. We learn a lot. So again, I preface my earlier talk back in the game reserve by saying that there's one group, I think Jose, who described so beautifully about how they were surrounded by a group of elephants, 10 elephants, different shapes and sizes, but they all look like elephants. Yeah, that's important. So that's where the tagline works. Yeah, but different shapes and sizes. But what is also interesting is that you see that they behave in a certain way to protect themselves, to protect the environment that they operate in, to protect the little ones that are very vulnerable. So I thought that was a great lesson and picture that we should learn as a GBC in organizing ourselves. So now there are a few questions to answer, but these are some of the key learning points or key points that we kind of agree. Shared resources. Now the central idea is to have WGBC pull together a central resource pool to provide guidance and assistance to GBCs in many areas. So these are just examples. Setting up a GBC, financial management, education, relationship building with local government, membership recruitment, marketing. There's no sense in trying to, again, reinventing the wheel, because so many of the GBCs have gone through exactly the same process. Maybe the context is slightly different, maybe the challenges are different, but there are so many common things that we have learned, as we've seen just in today alone. So if we can pull together the central resource, people or resources, I think and make available to all GBCs, I think that will make a lot of sense. So that is one of the idea about organizing. It's like the heart that has got to pump the blood to every part of the body. So now, before we do that, one of the point raised is actually we got to do a stocktake by WGBC. What do we mean by that? We need to know who are the thought leaders in the various GBCs. There are a lot of very influential and powerful people amongst you in different countries and good in different things. So are we able to source them out and find out who is good in what and then put them into this resource pool? Of course, the basic thing to say is, again, to quote this again, not what WGBC can do for you, but is what you can do for WGBC. So the second question that was not answered, I hope they will be answered in the form of people that you know in your GBC that can come forward and say, hey, I think I can help out in this area, regardless of where it is. I'm prepared to put my time, just like young man, put his time in to help other GBCs in the Asia Pacific network. So I think that is the underpinning attitude that we feel we must have from all GBCs. All right. The third idea here proposed is actually the WGBC as an integrator hub. Now, WGBC can be envisioned to be an integrated hub with a strong network with local GBCs. Other than the services that we talk about in terms of the few things I mentioned, but going even more down to earth, right? Could there be services such as back of house services? We know that many GBCs, when in the early stage of formation, always struggle with resources. 2-3 persons. How do you can't even start anything really? So can other GBCs that are nearby or with very strong relationship even consider the idea of providing back of house services so the GBC can concentrate to do what they are supposed to do in that country or in that locality? Again, conferences. We keep on running conferences. Every country has a conference. And yes, to some degree, we can make some revenue from there. To some degree, we have certain influence. But let's look at IT as a solution. Let's look at webinar. Maybe a combination of live presentation with video conferencing, webinars to help reduce the cost of running these events or activities. Again, regional conference materials made available to GBCs. And I think the EU example was very interesting. We talk about corporate sponsorship that benefit not just one GBC, but all the GBCs in a regional network. I think that's something I would like to see how APN can tap on. Not to ask a sponsor to come to APN, but if they like to, sure. But I'm sure there are also very big sponsors in Asia that would like to do like similar things. Now, partnership with other bodies, of course, this is taken to be understood as I also shared this morning about the partnership alliance with government, with various one. One of the interesting ideas was planted is this idea about ambassadors. Putting our GBC's members into these partners or industry associations as ambassadors. The whole idea about ambassador is really to build relationships, build bridges with another countries. Yes, sometimes they do lose their head when the two countries fight, but that's not the idea. The idea is really to be very clever about it, to make sure that we are well represented in all the other government bodies, universities, financial institutions, global industrial associations. Similarly, on the reverse, we can also consider admitting some of them into GBCs as what we call green building fellows. So this is again another idea that was brought up. Last but not least, talking about global and local strategies. Here, going beyond a tagline under the logo, the issue was also raised as to WGBC should play the role of driver of global strategies that can be filtered down to national and local level. Now, these strategies need not be geographically based, but could be basing on environmental themes. For example, high-rise, high-density housing. That happens in many parts of the world. So we're not limited to just the region, not just limited to geographical boundaries, but looking more closely at issues that affect the whole globe. And then we are then able to tap into all this common knowledge pool. So, and for best practices. Now, that's all the points that I'll raise. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Lee Shan. Any comments or questions on that one? As you can see, we're really talking about evolving into, quite a different sort of organisation than we are today. Might take some time. We are looking forward to 2050 and how we might get there. So we will be really kind of consolidating this material. You've heard from 2 aspects. There were 4 more. So there's a lot of depth in what we discussed. We're also going to make sure that we take your information and feed all of that into creating this future for the World GBC. And I don't even like to say World GBC. I think when you were talking before, when you talked about the World GBC movement, it's much stronger than talking necessarily just about us as an organisation, because that means it's actually you. So I think we can change the language, and there's quite a different feel around who we are together as well. But just before we wrap up, we're going to have another afternoon tea break and get a bit of coffee before the last session. I think we can eat in 5 minutes into it if you have got questions or comments about what Lee Shannon talked about, because there were some pretty interesting ideas in that. Any quick comments?
Just a thought which actually a few of us were discussing on the bus coming back from the reserve, and it links, I think, to some of the early ideas that Lee just described. John mentioned earlier a thing that we've developed in the UK called Pinpoint, and if people haven't seen that, I'd urge you maybe to have a look at it. I modestly describe it as Google meets TripAdvisor for the green built environment, because it's an online search engine like Google, and you can filter the results and so on, and like TripAdvisor you can go on and you can see what other people, your peers, think of those resources, because people like them or they rate them and they post comments on them. And one of the things we've started to do to make this more and more valuable is to encourage discussions around particular topics. And we have a week-long discussion on a tool or a case study or whatever, and we invite people to come and comment over the course of a week. We then gather all those comments and post them up there, so that enriches the resources. And it strikes me that we could not only, that idea and what sits behind it is something that we would very happily share with other GBCs. That's not a problem. But I can't help thinking, could that be translated into an internal resource for World GBC? Because if you created that kind of platform, You know, you could encourage debates around the sorts of things that may transcend the regional boundaries. They may be topics of common interest, and we could capture that information. And again, one of the beauties of this thing is it doesn't create a new repository of that information, it links to where that information is. So it will provide links to individual GBC sites and so on, so that that information would always be up to date and accessible, and you'd know who to go to. So certainly we will offer, you know, the learning that we've had from developing that platform and seeing if it's applicable.
Thank you.
One of the suggestions that we had in our group that we need the first possibility that we can contact the United Nations by itself, or we can work, you know, under their umbrella at least, to get more exposure and can be more here, you know, to them. I know so many international associations now they are working under the United Nations, one of the part of the United Nations, such as the World Engineering WPO, which is the World Engineering Organization, which is coming under the United Nations, and they are getting the full support of the United Nations. We can utilize these resources with us also. So this is one of the suggestions that
As we wrap this up, this session here, I hope you've got a sense of where the green building movement in the future might go, your possible role in that. This is not a static conversation, this will continue. If we can use resources like Pinpoint or any other types of social media type platforms that will facilitate us keeping on going and having an ongoing conversation around some of these issues, we will. I think that will be best. The next time that we meet all together in person will be in Brazil next August, I think, but we'll hear about that later. So I think by next August we will have moved to a whole nother level with this discussion. So that will be the next time that we have something really consolidated. And during the time between now and August, do expect to contribute, if you wish, to some of these topics in more depth. So on that, I will thank your contribution, you three, if you've joined me in